This is History Myths and Myth Conceptions. And today's myth is: Plato's birth name was Aristocles. Almost any summary on Plato's biography includes this story that actually Plato is a nickname. The philosopher we know as Plato was in fact born as Aristocles, a name that he inherited from his grandfather, because ancient Greeks had this kind of tradition. But later on, for one reason or another, physical features or his mastery of literature and philosophical ideas, Aristocles received this nickname, which later he turned into a pen name. You can read about it everywhere, including Wikipedia or from the links in the first, few pages of Google search, or in the Assassin's Creed Odyssey video game. How do we know that Plato's name was Aristocles? Well, the most popular source is Diogenes Laertius and his influential but not very reliable book on the history of ancient Greek philosophy. But he is by no means the only source. The story about Aristocles and his nickname can be encountered in many other ancient texts, including such important authors/philosophers like Seneca or Sextus Empiricus. The problem here is that we're dealing with an ancient anecdote, which came to existence after Plato was long gone. This anecdote was copied and pasted here and there for centuries, but it is extremely unlikely that it has anything to do with reality. We can be 99.9% sure that Plato's birth name was, drumroll, Plato. Here I'd like to recommend everyone to read a reasonably short article by James Notopoulos, one of the top scholars of Plato and Platonism. The article is called The Name of Plato, and it is very old, published in 1939. You can easily find it online. James Notopoulos traces the origins of this story about Aristocles to the Alexandrian biographers, and probably to peripatetics. At some point, they developed an interesting idea that if you're writing a biography of some important person, you should include as many amusing anecdotes of doubtful authenticity as possible. You should pay special interest to the physical appearance, and, if you can, you should examine the name of your subject and introduce some smart interpretations. Basically, Diogenes Laertius inherited this approach, and that's one of the reasons why his work is considered quite unreliable. Plato's name gives you a wonderful opportunity for these weird exercises, because etymologically it means broad. Initially, it probably was referring to broad shoulders. So there you go. Now you can tell everyone that Plato received his nickname because of some broad physical features, like, shoulders or his forehead. Or, alternatively, this broadness may refer to the broadness of his style or his thoughts, which is quite absurd because he published his first work as Plato, when nobody knew much about his style and how broad or narrow it was. But the main problem here is that Plato wasn't a nickname, it was a name. And we know it from prosopography. Prosopography is a study that identifies and relates a group of persons or characters within a particular historical or literary context. So essentially, James Notopoulos just went through the records, and here's a quote from his article. Aside from Plato the philosopher, the name Platon occurs 31 times in Athenian prosopographia and over 24 times in other parts of the Greek world. The chart appended to this study reveals that, of the 31 Athenians who bore the name Platon, 16 were contemporaries or near contemporaries of Plato in the 5th and 4th centuries. The large number of names reveals that the name Platon was a commonplace name, one of the regular Athenian personal names. Obviously, some people choose to change their names during their lives, but it is unlikely that we're dealing with something like that. And obviously, we're not dealing with a nickname because, once again, Plato wasn't a nickname, but a relatively common name. Yes, there was a tradition of naming children after grandparents, and indeed, Plato's grandfather was called Aristocles. But the child could also be named after somebody else. It is quite possible that Plato was named after a friend of his father. There was nothing unusual about that. As you can imagine, none of Plato's contemporaries like Xenophon or Aristotle ever mentioned anything about Aristocles or broadness of shoulders. Naturally, Plato never gave this kind of information as well. So yeah, Plato's name was Plato.